part 5 of answering this question, how do I get my child to listen to me? You've got the 3 words now, talk, listen, and talk. And then we've really reframed the question, more a question of how do I get my child or my teenager to listen to God? And we're just a tool being used to direct that child, that teenager to the Lord. Well, now I want to challenge you to think about the issue of that setting up a paradigm for how we approach the New Testament. Because there are some directives to parents as to how parents function. And one being in particular, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Now, as parents, we absolutely love verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. I think many Christian parents teach their kids that verse as the very first verse. I know with a couple of our kids, we did. We think it's great. We want them to obey, and they should obey. And it helps them to honor God. It helps, quite frankly, if we're not careful, we could look at it just as a way as parents just to say, wow, it makes life a lot easier. But that's not the purpose in it. But it does get to verse 4, and verse 4 says this, fathers, implying as the leaders of the home, fathers and mothers, but fathers primarily, first and foremost, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And many times we look at that and we say, okay, well, they're supposed to obey, and if they obey, then I'll do my part and not provoke them to wrath. But really, it's very clear. It's right to parents, and it's building off of what was set up in Deuteronomy 6, that we are to be talking to our kids, we are to be listening to them, and we are to be talking to them. And I really believe that that lets us understand in a much greater way what it means to not provoke them to wrath. And there are a lot of other things right there in that Ephesians chapter 1 through 5, building up to chapter 6 that are indicated as well. But Deuteronomy gives us as parents a great paradigm for understanding what will provoke a child to wrath or a teenager to wrath. Well, if we're not talking to them about all kinds of things in open communication, if we're not listening to them carefully and really what's going on in their heart, and if we're not talking to them again very diligently and making sure that we're answering their questions with God's Word in a very sufficient way, loving and caring way, then we are provoking them to wrath. And that then becomes a part, too, of whether or not we're bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So it's a beautiful picture of how God's Word works, where we have the Old Testament and the New Testament working together to present to us the need for Jesus Christ to enter a person's life and to help direct them in life. And we as parents have that privilege and responsibility of directing them to adequately answer the question, how do I get my child or teenager to listen to God?